Master, I salute you. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. We're in Book 4, Isolation Kaivalya. When a thing confronted with its object phenomenalizes any subconscious impression in itself, then that object is the stimulus of that subconscious impression. Thus, all subconscious impressions are associated with that cause and motives and mental substrates and stimuli. If they cease to be, the subconscious impressions cohering with them also cease to be. The question is raised if these fluctuations of mind stuff and the subconscious impressions are without beginning, how can they be destroyed? For surely the energy of intellect, chitta, which is without beginning, cannot be destroyed. In reply to this, he says, 11. Sense are associated with cause and motive and mental substrate and stimulus. If these cease to be, then those cease to be. Even a beginningless thing. Really? Even a beginningless thing evidently perishes. For instance, that fact that a thing is yet to be anagatatva. This is prag abhava. So it is not a proper middle term, sadhana, because it is too wide. As to the energy of intellect, on the other hand, since there is no cause which could make it perish, it does not perish. But the reason for this is not that it has no beginning. It has been stated in the sutra that there is a cause which brings about the destruction of subconscious impressions, although they are from time without beginning, helping and injuring are partial expressions. For the efficient cause of right living and wrong living and so on. Under this expression, the drinking of the spirits and similar acts are also included. The motive power, netri, is that which keeps the wheel moving, nayika. He gives the reason for this in the words, the root. Becoming operative is presentness, but it does not mean that right living as such is made to grow. Of this very point, the reason is given in the words, for it is not. That thing which is one is confronted would be such as contact with a maiden. So the meaning of the sutra is that where the more extensive is not, there the less extensive also is not. Since there is no production of that which is non-existent, or destruction of that which is existent, how will subconscious impressions, by reason of their existence as things, cease to exist? 12. Past and future as such exist. Therefore, subconscious impressions do not cease to be, for the different time forms belong to the external aspects. The future is that the phenomenalization of which is yet to come. The past is that the individual phenomenalized form of which has been experienced. The present is that which is entered into its functional activity. And this threefold thing is the object for the intuitive knowledge of the yogin. And if they did not exist as such, this intuitive knowledge, not having any object, would not emerge in the mind stuff. Therefore, past and future as such exist. Moreover, if the result of the karma, cause, effect, action, what is done, either that which is conducive to experience, or that which is conducive to liberation, when it is yet to emerge, were without any described existence, then the actions of the wise, directed towards this, or for the purpose of this, would have no ground, and a cause is capable of making an already existent result present, but not of producing. And that's I'm not producing something altogether new. I think of the definition of black magic as set forth by Aleister Crowley as black magic, or low magic, as some people would also say, is this it's when you're causing your change and stuff, or trying to cause that change, but it's not part of your purpose. And maybe it'd be better to call it evil magic, because if it's not part of your purpose in life, and you're going to this effort, perhaps it's the efficient cause, when established, gives aid to the particularized form to the effect that it does not cause anything quite new to come into existence. A substance, moreover, consists of a number of external aspects, and by variation of this substance's time form, the external aspects are in successive states. The past or the future does not, like the present, exist as a material thing, in that it has been changed into a particularized phenomenal form. How then is it? The future has its particular existence as a thing yet to be phenomenalized. The past has its particular instance as having so individual phenomenalized form already experienced. The individual phenomenalized form of a thing itself belongs to the present time form only. This cannot be for the past and the future time forms. For while one time form is present, the two other time forms are of course inherent in the substance. Hence the three time forms do not come into a state of existence after having been in a state of non-existence. With the intent to introduce the next sutra, he raises a doubt by saying there is no. The words of that which is non-existent have been introduced either incidentally or by way of illustration. 12. Past and future as such exist, for the different time forms belong to the different external aspects. There is no production of things non-existent, nor destruction of things existent, but emergence and re-emergence. Badaya Vyayau are nothing but a mutation of the different time forms, of external aspects which are existent. This is the meaning of the sutra. Experienced is that by which one gets to the individual phenomenal form. The meaning is that at the present its individual phenomenal form is not, and so the external aspect is existent in all three times, as he says, and if. For what is non-existent does not become an object of knowledge, because it is without any describable existence. For a mental act is nothing but shining forth of the object, and it cannot occur where there is no object, whereas the mental act of yogins has the three worlds for its object. The mental act of such as we are also, the world would not arise if there were no object, and this is quite consistent. Therefore the past and the future exist as connected inseparably with their generic forms. So the intuitive knowledge of one who has experience of this kind is called the cause of the existence of the object, because the future exists as something statable. It also exists as an object. As he says in the words, moreover, conductive to experience, the wise is the clever man. And as to any acts to be performed, when one thing is the cause of another, It can bring its particular function into play only when the effect is already existing. For instance, the chapters of the Veda referring to the cutting of sacrificial reeds, Kandalabha. For certainly these cuttings of reeds do not bring into existence what is not existing, but they cause modifications, or they bring near a thing which is existing. Similarly, the potter and the efficient causes lead to the present existences of a water jar which already exists, as he said, and already existent. Well, we evoke ourselves by sympathetic magic, as it is called, but if we just do, if we tie this knot here and draw this symbol here, it's going to do this in the physical world. It doesn't quite act like that. But if the past and future are to be supposed as being non-existent simply because they are not in the present, then, phew, sir, the present would also be non-existent because it is not in the past and future. But as to existence, irrespective of its relation to time form or to substance, it is equal holds for all three. As he says, the substance, moreover, the words are in successive states, meaning belonging to each state, one by one. The expression as a mental thing means in a substance which is a material thing. The termination, tas, is used for all case endings. If the past and the future are only so far as they are past and future, then at the present they are not, because at this time they are not past or future, as he says, and while one. He brings the discussion to a close in the words, state of existence after having been in a state of non-existence. Now, in our terms, we don't create and destroy. The scientist, we can see some particles appear and some disappear, but it's, there's still the material. Your working material that's already there. It's not that it's existent for non-existent thing. Maybe that's not the best example, but we think of a God who would create all this as being beyond time, space, and matter, a God of time, a Dahr, as the Arabs would say. And Stonehenge seems to have been built to deity of time, and many other monuments. These 13, these external aspects with the three forms are phenomenalized individuals, are subtle, generic forms, and their essence is the aspects guna. These are, of course, those external aspects with three time forms. Those which are phenomenalized are in the present, those which are subtle are the past and the future, and the six non-particulars, since this whole world is nothing more than a particular collocation of aspects, guna. It has, in the strictest sense of the aspects, as its essence, and in this essence, the exposition of the system has said, the aspects from their utmost height come not within the range of sight, but all within that range of sight, a phantom seems and quite, and empty quite. A phantom seems and empty quite. Okay. An objector says, this may be true, but this manifold amplification, prapancha, of the varied forms of the universe, vichva, having as its essence the kinds of mutation which are the states of the substance and its external aspects, cannot properly come out of one primary substance, or from a cause which has no diversity. Diversities of effect cannot come to pass. In reply to this, he says, 13, these are phenomenalized, are subtle. Their essence is the aspects. These external aspects, with the three time forms, both the phenomenalized and the subtle, have the aspects as their essence, for they have no other cause than the threefold aspects. But as to their diversity, it follows from the diversity, attending upon beginningless subconscious impressions, from hindrances produced by these aspects guna, in which sense it has been said in the Vayu Purana, because the primary cause has manifold forms, there is a marvelous mutation of the earth and other phenomenalized individuals, and of the 11 organs, which are present forms. There are past and future forms, which are the 6 non-particularized forms, and these arise according to their capacity, making now a distinction between the permanent and the impermanent forms of the universe. He gives the first its permanent form in the words, this whole world, this, and that is the visible world. A collocation means a mutation with a particular arrangement of parts. On this point, there is a specific mention of the Shas Tantra text. It is like a phenomenon, maya, but not quite a phenomena. It's like a phantom, maya, but not quite a phantom. Empty quite means perishable, for just as a phantom in no time assumes different shapes, so that those of all defects whose external aspects become visible and invisible change from moment to moment, whereas the primary matter is permanent, and thus not homogeneous with the phantom, and is accordingly as an ultimate reality. But if all things are aspects of guna, how is it that there is a single sound and a single organ of sense? We are reminded of Tantra and Yoga. Tantra being the left-hand path, Yoga being the right-hand path. They're both words for religion. Tantra, Yoga, calling out. Tantra, bringing in. I don't think that's entirely how you can state it, because both can be worship, invoking, and invoking, but Yoga is more in terms of connecting. Tantra is more in terms of identity. But forming identity, the Ishvara, strip yourself down to being the Ishvara. You're not the Ishvara in terms of a god. But compared to all the other things, we definitely, that is, you're higher than the light beings. So those things that other people would call gods, you'd be more exalted than that. But, of course, this is all in humility, right? 14. The thatness of a thing is due to a singleness of mutation. When the aspects disposed to vividness and activity and to inertia have their essential process of knowing, insofar as they are instruments of perception, there is a single mutation. For instance, the organ of hearing, when their essence is objects for knowledge, insofar as they are sounds, there is a single mutation, a sound, an object of sense. The sounds and other perceptible objects belonging to the general class of limitations in extent have a single mutation. An atom of earth, a part of fine substance, tanmatra, and these atoms have a single mutation. The earth, a cow, a tree, a mountain, for examples, by adding to each of the other coarse elements successively liquidity and heat and motivity, and making of a space, a generic form, the beginning of a single of all defect would be formed. They who from the following point of view deny the existence of a thing as such by saying there is no intended object disassociated from a mental act, but percepts are disassociated from intended objects and imagined as in dreams and similar states. And they who say a thing is only a readjustment of the percepts, like the objects of a dream, and not a thing in the full sense of the word. These, when the thing is presented by its own authority, as it is, tattva, according to it is seen to be there, idam, since they throw overboard the thing as such by an abstract vikalpa, thinking without force of proof, how in the very act of prattling it away, can their own words be worthy of belief? It may be granted that the threefold aspects, guna, have such a diversity of mutation, but whence comes a single mutation, so that one says, this is earth, or this is water? By raising this objection, since there is a contradiction between the three essences and the singleness, he introduces the sutra. Now, I am well aware all these mercury, salt, sulfur, fire, air, earth, water, these sorts of divisions aren't really the elements, but symbolically they play over well enough. 14. The thatness of a thing is due to a singleness of mutation. We see a single mutation characterized by the common nature of salt, and similarly a wick and oil and fire form a lamp. In the same way, the aspects guna, though many, have a single mutation. As a result of this, each of the fine elements, tanmatra, and of the elements, and of the products of the elements, has a thatness and a singleness, when their essence is objects for knowledge. Insofar as sattva is predominant, their essence is vividness, and, being subsidiary products of the personality substance, they have a single mutation in the form of instruments of perception, for instance, the organ of hearing. Insofar as the tamas of these same aspects is predominant, inasmuch as they are insensate, jada, and thus have objects for knowledge as their essence, there is a single mutation as being the fine element sound, an object of sense. By the words a sound, he indicates the fine element sound. By the words object of sense, he indicates that it is insensate. But the fine element cannot possibly be the object of the organ of hearing. The rest is easy. Now he raises up a destructionist, in Achika, who holds the theory of ideas, Vijñanavadin, by saying there is no intended object disassociated from a mental act. For if there be elements and products of elements distinct from mental acts, then we might suppose a productive cause of them, such as the primary cause. But in the strict sense, they are not anything different from ideas. How is it then that a primary cause is presupposed? And how is it that process of knowing, the organs of sense, which are evolved effects of the personality substance, are presupposed? To explain, since an insensate intended object cannot be vivid of itself, there is no intended object disassociated from some mental act. Association is coexistence, that is a relation. The absence of this is disassociation. The prefix vi is used in the sense of absence. The meaning is that there is nothing unrelated to some idea. In other words, something which might properly be described as non-existing. On the other hand, mental acts do exist disassociated from intended objects. For insofar as this mental act is vivid in itself, it does not require an insensate intended object in order to make a statement as to its own existence. So then, the holder of the theory of ideas, Vijñanavadin, has indicated two requisites: the fact that it is perceived, Vidyatva, and the fact that it is apperceived, along with something else, Sahu Palamba. These 2 points can further be brought out in a syllogism. Thus, whatever is perceived by whatever process of perception, that intended object is not distinct from that process of perception, just as the soul in the case of knowledge. Remember, both yoga and tantra are processes. So this apperception of elements is perceived by the contrary proposition, that is, that it refutes the absence of distinction between the process and the object. So the fact that it is perceived, which is less extensive as compared with what is the opposite of the distinction, which we wish to deny, as soon as this fact is known, posits the absence of distinction, which is more extensive with regard to itself, the perception, and when we see this, the fact that they are seen is different, which is just the contrary of this, is denied. Accordingly, when anything is invariably seen with another thing, then the one is not different from the other, just as the second moon, which is always perceived with the actual moon. And this is the case, that the object is always invariably perceived with the thought. Thus, this perception contradicts the more extensive term. The invariable relation contradicts the variable relation, which is more extensive than the distinction, which we must deny. Removing thus the variable relation, it rejects the distinction, which is less extensive than this relation. Let this be assumed, and if the intended object is not different from the thought, then how is it that they seem to be different? In reply to this, the Vijnanavadan says, imagine, as the destructionists say, because there is invariably an apperception of the object blue and the percept of this blue at the same time. There's no difference between them, and the difference that may be seen between them results from illusions of mental acts, just as a pair of all moons may be seen when there is one only without a second. The Vijnanavadan makes clear the imaginary difference in the words only a readjustment of the percepts. The author of the comment refutes this by saying these. Let's throw in the tarot card, adjustment, justice as it's called. A lot of the stages are not about just, throw it away. Here's an aspect. No, you're turning things over. The construction of the sentence is, how can their own words be worthy of credence? Presented means brought before them at the time of each perception. How is it presented? He replies, as it is, in the different ways that a thing shines forth as being the thing that is pointed out, as to this, and this, and this. In that very way, eo ipso theum, it is presented, but not as being reduced to an object of a mental act, or as being a figment of the imagination. The words, by its own authority, point out that the intended object acts as a cause with reference to the mental act, because the intended object has given rise to the mental act by virtue of its own power as an object for knowledge. It is on account of this that the mental act is the perceiver of the intended object. Now how could a thing which is of such a kind be thrown away by reason of an empty abstract thinking having no force of proving? For since an empty conception is no means of proof, therefore what is based upon it, and what is in essence that empty abstraction, is no means of proof. In this way, throwing overboard the thing as such, that is setting it afloat. An occasional reading is holding it under. In this case, too, the meaning is the same. Prattling away this object in this way, how can their own words be worthy of belief? This is what is intended. The two middle terms given, the invariable apperception at one time and the fact of being perceived, are non-conclusive. A lot of people claim experience, they still have belief, they still have faith. Or maybe they completely have faith in what they're saying. It wasn't experience at all. It was their interpretation, their convictions based on things. Emotional truth is no truth at all if it's not truth. Well, I feel it's true. Well, people can feel a lot of contradictory things are true. Because the negative statement is open to doubt, to explain the coarseness and externality appear in consciousness in the case of elements and products of elements, which, as you say, have the form of thought only. But these two qualities are not possible in the case of thought only. To explain, coarseness means pervading several points of space. Externality means related to separated points of space. And it is impossible that a single mental act should pervade several points of space and also occupy separated points of space. For it is impossible to have a single thing, the confusion of contrary qualities, such as occupying this point of space and not occupying this point of space. Else, if this were possible, one would have to admit that all three worlds are a single thing. If it be said that for this very reason we should admit that there is a difference in the mental acts as to coarseness and externality, in that there are as many thoughts as there are forms of the thing, then the reply would be, then, sir, in the case of the ideas which can grasp even the extremely subtle objects, finer than the coarseness and externality, and which take no notice of each other's behavior, and which are awake only to that one atomic object which comes within their range, how could there be the appearance of coarseness? And you cannot talk of what is perceived by the latter distinct impression, the kalpa, in language, which refers to the latter distinct impression, because there is no confusion of the content of this impression with anything else. And on the other hand, there is a clear appearance of coarseness, nor can it be said that the coarseness is externally sense, alokitam, by the first indistinct impression, and so the clearness of the knowledge, so the kalpa, which follows this, and which is conditioned by this avikalpa, could be explained. Further, this latter distinct impression is not, like the first distinct impression, limited to its form, akara, and nothing else. And I guess I will end there. And sometimes to clear the field, you have to look at things on an individual basis. Much like when you're meditating and you're trying to, okay, that sound, that object, this, and then you narrow down on your ritual or whatever the case is. Namaste. The mention is made by me and you.